I'm here today conducting an interview of Orn Huntington. This was conducted at 8 a.m. on June 29th, 2005. If you want to go ahead and just state your name for the record.
My name is Orn Huntington. I was born in Columbus in May of 1919.
What's your earliest memory of Columbus or growing up?
Probably going to kindergarten.
And where did you attend kindergarten at?
At Roosevelt High School in East End. It's been torn down now.
Did you have any heroes when you were growing up?
I don't recall any.
All right. How old were you when you realized that you might be gay?
Well, I became sexually active, I think, when I was about 16. That's the first time when I first realized that I was gay and that I was different from other people.
And at the time, what year would have that been?
I would have to figure that out.
Okay, let's see. If you were born in 1919, then that would have been 1925.
Probably.
Was gay even a concept at that time?
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't even know the word gay until I met my first person, and he was about 7 years older than me, and he used the word gay the first time I ever heard it, and I didn't realize that. I remember asking what in the world that meant, and he just sort of explained to me that that's how they referred to homosexuals at that time. That was, my God, probably the early 30s.
When you figured out that you were different, did you talk to anyone about that back when you were in your teenage years?
No, you didn't discuss it. As a matter of fact, in my family, I'm quite sure they probably knew I was gay, but the subject was never brought up, it was never discussed, it never was. Never in my entire lifetime until my middle 40s, after my mother passed away. And I had two sisters who were very sympathetic. And of course I discussed it with them. That was the first time I ever discussed it with my family. I never did discuss it, but I had two brothers that never discussed it with either one of them. Because they would not have been sympathetic, I'm sure. Because they were strictly macho guys.
So, after you realized that you might be different, how did you then explore that being different? Were there other people that you were able to meet? Or were there places that you went where other people like you gathered? Or was it something you more just kept into yourself? Or
no, when you did the times that you made contact with somebody. When I was 16, was through streets, theater, things like that. You never socialized. There was no place for you to go.
All right.
To the streets.
All right. Can you explain what you mean by the streets?
People picking up on the streets.
And were there particular places in Columbus where people knew that they could go and that kind of activity took place, or was it?
No, I don't think so. The downtown area was the most popular place. Downtown, around theaters and things like that.
How would people make contact? Just by making eye contact, or how did it go from seeing someone to actually speaking with them?
I would presume that people who were searching for that type of thing knew what to look for. I suppose when I was that age that I was probably yelling. I think kids are at that age more so than after they mature and have a little life behind them. When I was 20, of course, the draft came in, the Second World War, and enlisted in the service like everyone else did. And I went to Fort Bragg and field artillery and all that sort of thing. But I didn't, it was not for me. And so I just identified myself as being homosexual, and I was released.
Wow.
With a honorable discharge. And so I left there and went home. And then at that time I was 22, I think. And so I'd always wanted to go to Hollywood. So I, with my pay my severance pay, I got on a train and went to Hollywood and stayed there for 10 years. And then after that, I returned to Columbus. I was in Columbus then all during my, till I was about 70 years old, probably.
What happened when you told the military that you wished to be released because you were gay?
At that time, they couldn't cope with that. They couldn't understand it at all. They couldn't understand it at all. They still don't. But I had to have a friend verify. So I had a very, very good gay friend who went down and was interviewed and verified that I was homosexual. And they gave me honorable discharge and I went home. That's the last I ever heard from him. Now that I got severance pay.
Do you know of other people that were discharged in that same way? Are you aware?
No, I really was not at that time. Because I don't remember anyone like that.
Do you remember when you sat down with that first military person to tell them that? The first person you spoke with to say?
Well, I went to, but when I came home from where I was stationed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky, and was assigned to the 4 days hospital here, and was interviewed by a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, how the psychiatrists are, they were sympathetic, I guess, because I didn't have any problems while I was there. I was there for about a month before they released me. Yeah, I used to go for weekends and everything. That's all. That's about all I know about that period of my life.
And then you went to Hollywood.
Then I went to Hollywood, and
did you go by yourself?
I went by myself. I wore my uniform up there, and went to the Hollywood canteen. So I wanted to go to the Hollywood canteen. You could get in the service thing. So I put my uniform in, and then from then I got a job working at Lockheed Aircraft, and I checked in at the Hollywood YMCA. They had a pool that we went out. I worked night shift, and then daytime at the Hollywood canteen at the Hollywood YMCA. They had the studios were making all these war pictures, and so they needed young men for all these war pictures. And so they used to call around to the fraternities, and they called the YMCA. So I started working as an extra in movies, in these war pictures. So we worked at Lockheed at night, and in the daytime you went to the studios to work. And it was wonderful because it was so much fun. Every day was like a party. And they gave you $5 and a box lunch. And then back in 1942, 43, that was pretty good money. So that's what I did. And then I found out that if you joined the Screen Actors Guild, and you belonged to the union, you would get $10 and a half and a box lunch. So I joined the Screen Actors Guild, and then I worked. Then I contacted with Lockheed because I could work all the time once I belonged to the Screen Actors Guild. And I worked in Hollywood for 10 years, and I became a contract dancer at MGM and everything. As a chorus boy, and it was great fun. I spent my 20s in Hollywood. Then I came back to Ohio, And because pictures died in 1949 when television came in. And so there wasn't that much work anymore. So I came back to Ohio, and my sister, who had been in Ohio government for quite a while, got me an interview with the superintendent of banks. And I was interviewed by the superintendent of banks, and he was sympathetic. Of course, before that, I had worked in pictures, and when I first came back to Ohio, I worked in television, a lot in local television. And then this superintendent of banks, he was sympathetic to the arts because he used to play in a dance band. So he says, so he hired me as a bank examiner, and I had no experience as a bank examiner. But he says, this is nothing new. You learn how to do this. It's on the job. So I ended up being a bank examiner for the state of Ohio for 25 years. My life was not Ohio. And during that period of time, I became very active in the gay community in Columbus. And back in those days, the gay community, if they had a gay bar, which was the only place you socially could go to meet people, was in a bar, the police were completely always harassed us. Would harass you going in, coming out. They'd go in and raid these places, take your names, and they'd throw everyone out. They kept harassing people like that until the Stonewall thing happened in New York. And that ended that era. And you could socialize. But before that, in 1964, here in Columbus, I was so tired of that, the fact that all these bars were so crummy, and it's the only place you had to socialize. I decided that for Halloween, we would have a Halloween ball, and we would have it someplace where you could sit down at a table with tablecloths on and have a wonderful evening where you felt like you were a civil person that could have a regular life. So at that time, I had met Tony Susi, who owned the Berwick restaurant. I met him at the state fair. He had a booth at the state fair, and I was telling him about the Halloween ball that one had. And he said he had just built his restaurant out in Berwick. And he said, well, why don't you bring it to our restaurant? And I said, you really wouldn't mind having a gay function at your newest place? He said, no, of course we wouldn't. And so they were closed on Sunday. And so he said, you can have it on Sunday, and you can have the use of the whole restaurant. And so in 1965, we went to the Berwick House for our Halloween ball, and it was always on the Sunday before Halloween. And we had the whole use of the facility. And our committee read that if you did not wear a costume, then you must wear a tuxedo. And we had the room would seat 300 people. So that's how we started the Berwick Ball. And it was very successful. The Susi family was wonderful. They had none of their staff worked because of the secrecy. Everyone did not want people to know they were gay that came to this thing. So the Susi family, only the Susi family worked that night. And there was none of their regular personnel that worked in the restaurant. And it turned out to be absolutely wonderful. And so the kids who were in costume decided to do little skits for the different costumes they were in. And it was wonderful. It turned out to be the best show in town because it was not a drag show. It was a evening of entertainment with different skits and different groups that wonderful show.
That first year, how did you advertise the fact that you were having this party?
Well, word of mouth. And then we sold tickets.
Do you recall what the ticket price was?
I think $2.
And how many people came that first year?
Well, the first year, it was about 100. The second year, it was sold out. It was sold out for 30 years. It lasted for 30 years. What we did was the person my dear friend who just passed on, David Zimmer, was the MC for the first few years. And of course, that's when we named him Dolly. And that's where Dolly became famous because of her participation in the Halloween Ball. And it was so successful and wonderful. We never gave cash prizes. All we gave was ribbons. First, second, third, and fourth. And you won, and you competed for the ribbon, not for prizes. So that was my second, and that's when the Stonewall gave David and I the award for being two of the most influential people of the past 20 years in Columbus gay community. And then also the Human Rights Campaign Fund also gave me, I forget which year it was, but in the early 90s, the Torchbearers Award for the work I'd done in the gay community.
You mentioned that the police frequently harassed people who went out to the bars. Did you ever have any problems with Berwick? Were there ever any?
No one. The only time, we never had any trouble with Berwick. Of course, there was one incident where a couple had a breaking up party, which was not unusual. But the one boy, and the boy was a very prominent boy, but they broke up, and the one boy left and walked out, and he was a little inebriated. And he walked out and stood on the corner, and a car came around the corner and hit him and killed him.
Oh my!
And of course, I was interviewed on that, but it was strictly an accident, and there was nothing involved in the party that was would have led to his death.
Now, what year was that? Do you recall?
Gosh, I'm not very good in years.
Oh, that's all right. Do you recall what the person's name was?
No, but he owned I think he owned the Red Astaire Dance Studio here in town. And he lived in Summit Chase. He was quite well known and well to do. But that was the only incident we ever had at Berwick. And it was as deemed an accident.
Certainly.
But
do you recall what the program was that first year?
well, the first year we didn't go to Berwick till the second year. The first year we had it. I had to sneak around and find a place to hold it, and I ended up renting the American Legion Hall on North High Street, which was hysterical. And of course, because of the police thing, we couldn't advertise it, and we couldn't tell anybody where it was going to be. So we gave everybody that bought a ticket a phone number, which was a payphone out on the street in front of this place. And they were to call at 6:30 that evening on this number, and we had somebody in the phone booth, so they called that number, and we would tell them where the party was. That's to avoid having them raided by the police.
And everyone understood that plan, and
yeah,
nobody was concerned about buying a ticket and not knowing where it was in.
Yeah, that was it. So that was how the first one was done, and that was the year there was 96 people at that party.
And that was 1964.
64.
And then 65 was the first year.
First year in Berwick. And from then on, it was sold out for 30 years.
Well, what did you tell the people at the American Legion Hall that you were renting their space for?
We just said, well, they rented it out for parties.
Okay, so you just said
we were having a party. And I didn't want anyone there.
Right.
Of the company. So all they had was a janitor, and he was in another part of the building. So we never had any problems. We didn't have any problems. But it was really fun that first year. We have to go back to 1956. That was a time when I lived up in a place called Rathbone, which is up by the Susi. And that's when I started giving parties. I had rented this house, and it had a big barn, and it was a party barn. And that's when I started giving parties. But once a month we used to have a gay function up there. It was called the Rathbone Ranch. And what had we kids would come for that party. It was always on a Saturday night, and there, and they would come from all over Central Ohio to there, and that place held about 150 people, and you could dance, and we always designated a little group to put on a skit or something like that for entertainment, and we did that for about a year. Then it got a little tough. I was writing these skits all the time. So I started signing them. Well, different groups were putting this on, and then the kids from Dayton, Ohio, wanted to put on the skit this one time. This was for the Memorial Day of 1956, and they wanted to put on that. And of course, they started doing their rehearsing their skit in Dayton. And evidently there was friction between different groups. And so somebody was thrown out of the group, and so they wrote letters to the Delaware County Sheriff's Department saying what kind of a function it was and so forth. And so as a result, on the Memorial Day of 1956, they raided the ranch party, like they were raiding all the places. And so that was the end of the parties at Rathbone Ranch.
Was anyone arrested?
Me?
They actually arrested you.
Oh yes, I had to go to court and pay a fine.
What would you remember what you were charged with?
Well, I'll tell you what I was charged with. What we had done, everyone brought their own bottle. There was a BYOB,
Sure.
And there was a bar there, and they had a bar, and there was kids assigned to bid. We put numbers on everyone's bottle. So all you did is come up and say, I'm bottle so-and-so, and they would make drinks for you. And, but there was no money involved, except we had bought some cigarettes for kids because they'd run out of cigarettes. We had some packages of cigarettes behind it, and there was probably $5 or so for the change or something. So they accused us of selling booze because there was money behind the thing. So they charged me with illegally selling booze, which was not true because everyone brought their own bottle.
How many policemen came out and did the
about
raid?
20. It was the Delaware sheriff.
Wow.
What they did, they wrote the letter to the Columbus Police Department, and the Columbus Police Department, since it wasn't in their jurisdiction, forwarded the letter to the Delaware Sheriff's Department. And the funny thing was, there's several kids that were doing the show, and some of them were dragged for the show. There was some friendly neighbors way down the road where all the police collected, and someone called me and said, I don't know what you're doing up there, but you better straighten up because the police are down here and they're going to come up there. So I went and told the kids that were in drag, I said, put on your regular clothes. And this one kid who was very, I came in this outfit. So they came in there and it was flashing pictures and everything. And of course, it was a big thing since it was Memorial Day weekend. There must have been 300 people there in a building that would hold 125. And of course, this funny story was that the kids started running everywhere and said, of course, we had cornfields and things on it. They said, why they stumped 15 acres of corn flat. But the funny thing is, the police came up and there was this narrow road, and they crossed over the road and closed the road down so no one could get. But everyone jumped in the cars and went the other way. And it was funny, and it wasn't. They didn't hold anyone. Everyone left. But we went to the party, but I was the only one who was charged. Oh yeah,
It was in the newspaper.
Oh yes, this was 1956, and it came out in the Delaware newspaper headlines that there were 150. We called it the Olympiad Club. That was what the club was. They said there were over 150 men there in Bermuda tight shorts.
Scandalous.
Scandalous. And in 1956, that was the idea. If you wore shorts, you were suspect. But so that ended the Rathbone Ranch thing, and it was after that, it wasn't until 1964 that I did parties again, and that's when we started Berwick.
You said that you wrote skits.
Oh yeah, we did skits and things.
Do you recall any of the skits that you put together?
No, not really, except that we used to do "This Is Your Life" type of things, you know, and we'd make funny remarks, you know, like we'd bring people, "This is your old lover," or something like that, you know. It was all kind of really funny stuff, that kind of skits.
When you were talking about Berwick before, you indicated there was a committee that helped put together.
Well, yes, we had a committee because you had to have your entertainment. You had to do the sets. We built a set at Berwick every year. We built a set because we had to have a stage. There wasn't a stage there. So over the years, we developed a stage that collapsed, and so we used to store it and then bring it back every year and build up the stage. So there was always people working on music. There was the sets. That was really the big thing, getting the sets ready, decorating the room. The rooms were all decorated. Different years, we had a theme, different theme every year.
Do you recall who was on the first committee?
Dolly and I. And then from then on, we added people to help us. Especially, then we had Dick Frank did costumes and did a lot of decorations, designed decorations for the place. He was with us for innumerable years. Practically all the time we were there. I did it for 10 years and then I retired, and it was handed down to different groups. And it finally dissolved, probably about 5 years ago, when the kids today don't understand a white tablecloth and an elegant room and a tuxedo. They're not into that. The kids today are, I don't know. I have a very difficult time understanding their thinking and the way that they handle it. That's one reason why I retired from it, because the kids, the younger generation coming up, had different ideas than I did about what the theme of my life wanted to be. And so they ended up moving it to Valleydale, making it a big thing, giving cash prizes. And what happened was all the professional drag queens competed for the prizes. It wasn't different people that never did this, making it amusing and fun. And then it turned out to be a bar party. And that ended it. People lost interest. And that ended the 30 years of thing. Because I had people come here from different parts of the country, and they couldn't believe that we were having this kind of a function in Columbus, Ohio. It was a wonderful thing. And the other thing about it, I never discriminated about different groups, which in the gay community, you have little groups here and little groups there. Anyone who wanted a ticket, it was available as long as tickets were there. We never said, we don't want to put that group in our thing. No, if you were gay and you had the price of a ticket, you were welcome. And that made it wonderful. The whole gay community merged and had a wonderful evening, and no one was bitching about different groups. And so it brought the whole gay community together, and that was one of the reasons why it was a success.
You've mentioned Dolly a couple of times. How did the two of you first meet?
50 years ago or so, he was going to perform at one of the bars. He was going to do one of his evening parties, and I went to see him. And we met and we were friends ever since. Of course, he worked at the bank, and we just became good friends over the years.
But before you went into the military and you were living in Columbus, did you ever go out to any gay clubs during that time period? Or do you remember there being gay clubs during that time period?
Yes, when I first came out, I was 19 when I came out. There was a wonderful gay bar. When I came out, it was an old carriage house behind Egan Ryan Funeral Home there on Broad Street. And it was up on the second floor of this carriage house. What did they call that? Actually, they called it the Mayflower. I think that was the name of it. And what you did, you up there, and you rang a doorbell on this place down there. There was an old carriage house back there behind one of the buildings. You rang the doorbell, and they could raise it. They had a trapdoor. They raised it. You could look down and see who was at the front door, and they would buzz you in. And that was I thought that was wonderful. That was a wonderful place because you could have a great deep drink. I don't know if people brought bottles in. I was 19 at the time, but you could dance, and it was great fun. And there was never great crowds there. It was kind of a small operation. I think at times I don't think there was more than 25 people there when I was in there. But we used to go there. That was the first gay bar I was ever in.
How did you find out about it?
Word of mouth.
Were there other clubs during that time period before you went into the military that you recall either hearing about or going to?
I don't know, in those early years, there used to be the Oasis bar at the Chisholm Hotel. That's still, they tore that down, didn't they? They tore that down. There was a bar called the Oasis in there.
Now, was it a gay bar, or was it just a bar that gay people
It was a bar that gay people went to, and sometimes police would come in and throw you out. They would come in and say, "We don't want your type in here." But the bar was very sympathetic to gay people, and that was the only place you went.
You indicated in order to get into the Mayflower, you had to knock on the door and they checked you out to see whether or not they wanted to let you in or not.
Yeah.
Anyone could just walk into the Oasis. There was no...
Yeah, no one can. Yeah, it was a hotel.
Right,
Hotel bar.
right. Were you allowed to dance at the Oasis?
Oh, no.
So that was more just a gathering
It was
place.
just a gathering place.
All right.
It was just a gathering place.
Any other places that come to mind from that earlier period?
But, it was just social things until later on that, in the early years, that's about all I remember.
All right. After you came back to Columbus, after you left the military, you went to Hollywood, then
Never
you
came back.
came back to Columbus. What sorts of social activities, were there clubs that you went to
Oh,
then?
yes, there was clubs. There were clubs.
Do you recall specifically what those might have been?
The Blue Feather, I remember.
The Blue Feather?
The Blue Feather.
Where was that at?
It was at Mound and Front Street, but the freeway came in and eliminated that. And they moved up. They took it and they moved it up to across the gate from the fairgrounds. Do you know about that place?
I've heard it from other people about a bar up in that vicinity.
Yeah, and it was, I forget, they had a name for it. The Peppermint Lounge. I think that's what they called it. But most people referred to it as Rosemary's because she was the operator of it. Because the one at Mound Street was run by her father, and she inherited it, and she moved up there, and then so the father died, and she inherited it, and she moved up there, and it's called Rosemary's. And that was active after I came back from Hollywood, so it would be in the early 50s.
Now, Rosemary's father, was he gay?
No,
What was his connection to...
he just read a gay bar. He sat in the front, by the front door with his dog. I remember, his name was Happy. He sat by the front door, and every time a policeman came in the door, the dog would bark and scream and holler. I remember that very well. And then there were places, there was another famous bar on Long Street. God, I forget what the name of that one was. But we even had Phil Stiller in there. She loved gay people. Of course, she came from Lima, and she was to come down there. There was some queen down here that used to make the costumes, and that's why she came in the bar. You know, she entertained at the Miramore, which was a very elegant dinner on Front Street. That was about it, and then that had to be in the early 50s. And we used to at dinner parties and things like that. We used to have lots of dinner parties. Because my mother died in 59. After my mother died in 59, at our home, you used to have what they call them after bar parties. And like you'd be at Rosemary's, and the bar closed at midnight or wherever it did. And somebody would always have an after bar party. And you'd buy a case of beer or something like that, and everybody would go to the bar parties. And so I used to have bar parties. And my family home was 9th Avenue, right off of Neal. It was one of those great big old houses. So after my mother died, one sister came to live with me, but she had been widowed. And so we redecorated the house, and it had a double living room. One of those old houses had 2 living rooms. And so in the one living room, we put down a tile floor for dancing. And God, we used to have wonderful parties. And of course, those after-bar parties were dance parties in those days. And finally, the university came and took the house to expand the medical center. And I had friends saying, they may tear that house down, but they'll never get that dance floor up. Because it was a great time. We had many great times there.
Did you ever have an any problems with the police when you were
No.
none of the neighbors complained or?
No. No. But the thing is, you can't get after bar parties anymore. But now, I don't know about it, but it got to the point of where people treat your house like a bar. They'd stamp up cigarettes on your floor, and so, and you couldn't discriminate against who you wanted to have come to your house. And that's why people start treating your house as people that you didn't particularly want to invite into your home. Would come to your home, they didn't respect your home. So as a result, people stopped doing that. And so that ended another era of after bar parties that were fun things.
It sounds like, based upon what you've shared with me, that you were often a party organizer.
Right.
How was it that you came to be the party organizer?
I don't know. It was just gradually put on to me. Have Orn do it. Have Orn do it. Orn could do it. Orn knows everybody. Orn could do it. And which is what I did. And then after I started doing parties and things like that, back to the Rathbone Ranch days, and then they said, when we decided that we needed a Halloween party, and I organized the first one, then that just mushroom.
Tell me about relationships back then. What were relationships between men and women like back then? Are they the same as today? Did people date and become couples, or?
Yeah, pretty much so. Of course, another great party giver in Columbus at that time was Harold Cull.
Harold Cull?
Cull, Kull. His family had a very prominent and elegant jewelry store on South High Street, just in the block down from the entrance to Lazarus. And he lived out in Berwick, and he had a swimming pool, and he used to give Sunday afternoon parties during the summertime in the pool gym, and those were great fun. And he often gave during the period of after bar parties too, but he was more selective about who he let in his house. But he was a great party giver, and he organized a lot of things in Columbus during that period.
Were there other people who were prominent either in their activities, organizing, or operating bars, or entertainers?
Not particularly. The only performers that really did things like that were people that performed in Berwick, but they were not prominent entertainers or professional entertainers, like you would call certain drag queens are actually professional entertainers because that's all they do that. But these people that just do it for fun are entirely different. As Doll used to say, I am not a drag queen, I am an entertainer. But no, life sort of progressed around different bars and so forth like that. During later time, probably during the 50s too, earlier 60s, there was places like Frankie's, which was out on East Main Street.
Now, what was that?
It was a bar, but it was a very good dance bar. It was run by Bob Lewis. Bob Lewis was an old-time bar owner here in Columbus. He owned Frankie's, he owned the Turf Side, and then he went to Cincinnati and opened the Badland. As a matter of fact, at this present time, he lives in Tucson, and I see him occasionally. He's 75 and not in very good health. But the Frankie's was lots of fun. It opened, and then they had an incident where somebody's boyfriend got a little drunk, and so he decided to go out into somebody evidently attempted to rob him and shot him, and he was murdered in the parking lot. And that ended Frankie's. Then the turf side was out of City of Columbus, and it was down across from the South Downs place, and it was strictly an after-bar place. It would, when the bars closed in Columbus, everyone went to the turf side, and it ran for quite a few years. It died too, like most of them do eventually. Bob moved on to Cincinnati. Then there was another. Then when the disco period came in, the disco and the rock and roll type period came in, there was a place on South High Street, but that was during the rock and roll period, and it lasted for a couple of years. And the building was, and it was raised for the mall, City Center Mall down there.
Was it called Ties?
Yeah, that was Ties, yeah. That was it. It ran for quite a few years. It was a really nice bar. But it was during the rock and roll period, the beginning of the disco era.
You mentioned a little bit ago about when the police raided your barn party in Delaware County and how that ended up in the newspaper. Do you remember any other things that happened in the early days that ended up in the newspaper about gay people getting in trouble or difficulties or any scandals or?
No scandals, nothing that I can recall or am aware of. I don't recall anything like that.
All right.
Everything was so undercover, or people just didn't talk about it, or it was so low-key.
You mentioned a couple of times the Stonewall riot in New York City. Was there ever a time period here in Columbus where gay people fought back against the police?
Not that I recall. Not that I can recall. But after the judicial rulings on that, things quieted down in Columbus. We didn't have that problem anymore.
What do you mean by the judicial rulings?
Well, in the Stonewall case,
Okay.
when they ruled that they could not raid places like that, it was unconstitutional. I think police all across the country realized that period had come to an end. There was a wonderful bar at the old Lincoln Hotel on Broad Street, just before you get to the freeway. I think there was a wonderful old residential hotel. It was an elegant hotel, but they had a bar in there that was a wonderful gay bar. People went there to be. It was back in those days. You always put on your best clothes, your suit and tie and everything. You went to the bar on Saturday night, and they had a woman in this town. Her name was Peg Wilson, and she played the piano there and sang. I don't think she was a lesbian, but she looked like a lesbian. You know, she had the slick back hair there. Lead Lily type of hair. So she played a wonderful piano and sang great songs. And she had a gay son, but who I knew quite well. But that was a wonderful place, and that went for quite a number of years. And that was early. That was in the late 40s, I'm sure. Late 40s.
That was the Lincoln Hotel?
The Broad Lincoln Hotel. I think it's still standing, but I don't know whether it's a hotel anymore or not.
Were there ever any people who were movers and shakers within the regular community that were either gay or rumored to be gay, famous people, elected people, people from prominent families?
There was John Odie, who was, their family had a Pontiac dealership, and Lake. That was quite a little scandal. He had this boat on Buckeye Lake, and he was a heavy drinker. And he had all these, there was 4 or 5 people on the boat. And they were all drinking and driving these. And John and his friend went below deck. And there was 2 boys who were passed out and drinking, laying on the deck. Another boat came by and swamped the deck, and these 2 boys who were passed out were thrown overboard, drowned. And that was a scandal. But I don't think it ever, in the publicity, there was never anything said about him being gay. It was just an accident. The 2 boys, but that they were gay, and they were all out there carrying on, and that's what happened.
Did most of the gay clubs have some sort of system where you had to pass through a doorway in order to get into the club? I mean, did they monitor who came and went pretty closely in those days?
Not in those days. No, that didn't happen. I don't recall any time when you were denied entrance to a gay bar. Because people who didn't want to go to who were straight up didn't go to those places.
Did the bar owners do anything to let the patrons know when a police officer showed up? I mean, were there...
Oh, yes.
Okay, how did that work?
Well, sometimes, but they had a button or something under the bar or something, and they flipped that and the lights would start blinking or something like that in the place.
And people knew that meant that the police were
there. That means to sit down. I remember a bar where I was in Washington, D.C. at one time, where you could not stand and drink. You could sit at the bar, but if you saw some friend over across the way in a booth, you could not pick up your drink and go over there and sit down. You would have to go over there, and a waiter had to take your drink over. You were not allowed to walk around. That was some of the restrictions of the gay bar, and as I recall, I think sometimes that was true in maybe 1 or 2 of the bars here in Columbus.
Somebody had told me once that men weren't allowed to dance together. So if the police came, that was something that had to stop.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, but that's why he did it in secluded facilities. That's where he did it, because no, you didn't dance in public bars where they were open to the public.
Were you ever present in the bar when they were raided by the police?
Oh, lots of times.
And what would happen?
Nothing. They just come in and say, "Everyone leave." They just empty out the place, or take names.
So they would just make everyone provide them identification?
Yeah.
And they'd write down your name?
Yeah, write down your name and you leave.
And that's just like a threat to you, like,
yeah,
we know
it
who
was
you
a
are.
threat. Yeah, it was a threat. And then they always try to cite the owners for serving drinks to minors and that sort of thing. They could find anyone who was done. That's why they asked for identification, to see if you were underage. No, they used to do that. And of course, that was very prominent in Hollywood. When I was in Hollywood, went to the gay bars in Hollywood. Police harass those places all the time. They did the same thing. Take your name and so forth.
You talked a little bit before about why you started organizing these parties. But why was it that you decided to do such a public thing as organize Berwick? I mean, I realize Berwick was a private event, but it was still a pretty public thing.
Oh yes, but I don't know. Friends just designated me to start those things, and it was part of social life, to have a gay social life. And that's how we created our own social life, by creating our own social activities. And that's how, because keep things on, you have to have some outlet. for your activities and social life. That's how we did it. We created our own social life by creating our own functions.
Did men and women hang out together back then, gay men and gay women?
Not as much as they do today.
Did women have their own separate places that they went?
Yes, I think they did.
Do you recall any?
I don't recall it. I was never, there were never very many active lesbians around. Maybe you do one or two. But that's about all that I knew. And it wasn't until the liberation thing that the lesbians came out of the closets. And now they're everywhere, and they run everything. And but before that, if you knew one or two, you were lucky.
Were there racial restrictions in the gay bars? Were African Americans welcome to come out to a gay bar? Did you ever see that? Or
I don't recall very much racial thing. I knew quite a few black gays. They come out to the gay bars, but not in great numbers. I don't know whether it was because there weren't a lot of them out, or they just didn't socialize as much. But there was always some black guys around. Not very many that I recall in Columbus, but there used to be black after bar places out in the black community out in East Long Street. I remember we used to go out there occasionally. Those were wild after-hour bars, and they were really quite fun. They were black bars.
so were these regular bars that then were like gay after hours? Is that?
Well, they were after-hour bars that were that gays were welcome to come to, but they were basically black regular bars.
Do you recall where any of them were at, or what the names of them were?
Most of them were on Long Street. Not all of them. Remember, I was to them maybe not more than a half dozen times.
We've talked about a lot of different types of places people went. You mentioned some bars and some hotels where people hung out there. Were there ever any bathhouses that you were aware of in Columbus? You know, in other places that was a part of the.
The only ones I'm aware of was the one on Livingston Avenue.
Okay.
And as I told Ernie, I've never been to a bathhouse. I was tempted, but somehow I just never had the nerve to go.
Were there any restaurants that were either gay owned or gay friendly where a lot of gay people went?
No, outside of the Berwick Susi's restaurant, I don't recall any specific gay restaurant.
Sure.
They weren't a gay restaurant, but they welcomed gay people there.
Do you recall any organizations or clubs that basically were gay people gathering to do, I don't know, to go bowling or to play cards or to do
We used to have some bowling leagues, but I'm not that athletic. I never went into bowling, but there were bowling leagues.
In the early days, were there any publications? You know how now you can go out to a bar and there might be like a little publication, some sort of do you recall anything like that?
Nothing like that. People were too closeted to be outside of the advocate. That's the only thing you ever saw.
You talked a little bit about the police harassment in the bars. Any other thing that you recall about how gay people were treated differently or discriminated against? Any other major way that you remember that happening in those days?
We always said we were about employment.
Tell me about that.
Well, I never had any problems, but during the 25 years I was with the state, I was very close to the workplace. Never discussed anything. You tried very carefully not to be gay at the workplace because you know how the guys all stand around and talk about the queers. So no, I think you have to be very careful in the workplace unless you were in certain industries, such as decorating or something like that.
Were you aware of people who were fired for being gay? Do you recall any of that happening?
No, I'm sure there were, but I don't recall any specific incidents.
Any other types of discrimination that you can remember, or areas where you felt like you had to be extra careful?
I would say you had to be certainly careful at certain public places, like restaurants or things like that. Certain places that you just didn't dare to be flamboyant at all. I don't know whether you would be ejected from those places, but I would think you might be discriminated against or looked down on. You kind of trying to avoid incidents and things like that. But I don't recall anything particularly in mind.
Was it possible for two men to get an apartment together? Did landlords think that was funny? I had somebody tell me once that was a couple that they told a landlord that they were cousins.
Oh, I think that was pretty common. Yes,
Because the landlord wouldn't want to rent to
Yeah.
a gay couple.
I think that probably that was a form of discrimination. I think was pretty prominent. But the girls never had trouble like that. Boys did. You live everywhere. No one ever thought about two women together. That was perfectly all right. Yeah.
Why do you think people discriminate against gay people so much and just seem to have this bigotry that's just deep-seated?
I think it's fear. They think it's a danger to their way of life. I think that somehow or other it's going to be a hazard to their way of life. And I don't think there's any reason for it. But I think that's one of the reasons, because they fear something, somehow or other it's contagious. And of course we all know it's not contagious.
You talked a little bit earlier about it was your observation that gay people are different today than they were in the past. How in your perception, how is the gay world different today than it was?
They don't have the restrictions today on their personal life that they had back in the 40s. If you were kind of closeted, you had to be careful of what you did, how you conducted yourself. Today you don't have to do that. They have the personal freedom of doing whatever they want to do, whatever they want to. And as a result, they've lost their good manners. Because good manners is something that doesn't really exist much anymore. Especially, and I see it a lot in the young people. Not only the gay people, but all the young people today. But it's true in the gay crowd. You don't have to put on a show of any kind to make people think that you're respectable. And back in the old days, you had to do that. If you were too flamboyant, you were ostracized. So you tried not to be flamboyant. So some people can't avoid being flamboyant. But if you wanted to career-wise and so forth like that, you had to put on a show, being respectable or the ordinary American life style. That I recall during the banquet, I'd go out for lunch with the guys from the office, all macho guys, and I'd be walking down High Street, and here would come a little queen that I know very well. The one thing I never did was not acknowledge to nod. Though I was with all these guys, that I had to maintain my persona of being a businessman. But I always felt, you had to I would either wink or nod to them. I never tried to discriminate with people, say, by ignoring them, instead of being snobbish. That's no way to, yeah, and that's one of the reasons I think I was very popular and successful in the Berwick thing, because it never discriminated against a flamboyant queen or anyone by saying you're not welcome here. If you're gay, you're welcome, and it works. Treat others as you would have others treat you, then you'll never have a problem.
You've talked a lot today about different ways that you've been involved in the community, ways that you've organized things that have benefited both yourself and other people in the community. Out of all of everything you've talked about today, and maybe some things you haven't talked about today, is there anything that when you think about it, you think, gosh, that's what I'm most proud of, or that's what I'm most pleased with?
Well, I'm very proud of the Berwick thing, though, and I'm very flattered when people acknowledge that, like Stonewall did, and things, and that Human Rights Campaign did, and that somehow I made a little dent in my life. That I'm very happy with it. Of course, but nowadays I find myself when I'm out with a bunch of people, and especially the young group, I feel segregated because I can't think like they do, and I feel that I can't participate in their way of life. But I don't discriminate the fact that they are the way they are today. That's their life. I live my life. Let them live theirs.
At the time that you were organizing these events and creating these opportunities for people to get together, did you think that you were being brave?
No, I thought I was having fun. No, I never at any time thought I was being brave or that I was an activist. I never felt that.
How about now?
Well, now I think back, people say, well, you were an activist because you created these things for people. But at the time, I didn't think so. I thought I was just having fun, doing things that everyone wanted to do and having fun. So, but when I look back to things I was doing things that weren't acceptable in general.